When a man takes you for granted, words often fall on deaf ears. You can talk, explain, plead, or even argue, but if he already assumes you'll always be there, your words won't shake him. That's why silence is so powerful. It disrupts the pattern. It forces him to sit with his own thoughts instead of drowning them out with your emotions. Silence creates distance, and distance creates clarity. Think about it. When something is always available, we don't appreciate it. It becomes part of the background, something we assume will always be there. But the moment it disappears, the moment we can no longer reach for it as easily as before, we start to feel the loss. That's what happens when you remove your energy, your time, and your attention. Suddenly, the man who took you for granted realizes that something is missing. And that realization is far more powerful than any words you could ever say. Silence makes a man reflect. It forces him to confront his actions or his lack of them. If you've been pouring into someone who hasn't been pouring back into you, stop. If you've been the one always reaching out, always initiating, always fixing things, stop. Let him notice the shift. Let him feel the emptiness where your presence used to be. But here's the key. You have to be strong enough to hold that silence. This isn't about playing games or manipulating someone. It's about teaching him through your actions that you will not be taken for granted. If he truly values you, he will step up. He will start to wonder where you've gone, why you've pulled away, and what he needs to do to fix it. Men understand loss more than they understand words. They react to change more than they react to conversation. If he has gotten comfortable treating you a certain way, it's because nothing has disrupted that comfort. Your silence is the disruption. And that's what will force him to reevaluate everything. But what if he doesn't care? What if he never reaches out, never notices your silence, never tries to fix things? Then you have your answer. A man who does not notice your absence does not deserve your presence. A man who does not care when you pull away was never truly invested to begin with. And that realization, painful as it may be, is a gift because it frees you. It shows you exactly where you stand without you having to beg for clarity. So, if you feel unappreciated, if you feel like your presence is being taken for granted, stop explaining yourself. Stop arguing. Stop repeating the same conversations over and over again. Instead, go silent. Pull back. Focus on yourself. Let him feel the weight of your absence. And then watch what happens next. When a man gets too comfortable, when he assumes that no matter what he does, you'll always be there, that's when he stops putting in effort. That's when he starts to take you for granted. But here's the truth. What is given too freely is never truly valued. The moment he believes he has you, no matter how he treats you, he stops trying. And that's where you have to introduce the power of boundaries. Boundaries are not about punishing someone. They are about teaching them how to treat you. They are about showing them through your actions what you will and will not tolerate. Because if you allow a man to cross the line once, he will do it again. If you accept less than what you deserve, that becomes the new standard. A man should never feel like he can do whatever he wants and still have access to you. He should never assume that his lack of effort, his inconsistency, or his neglect will go unnoticed. The way you stop him from taking you for granted is by making it clear there are consequences for his actions. If he doesn't show up for you, he doesn't get access to you. If he makes you feel unimportant, he loses the privilege of your presence. But here's where most people struggle. They set boundaries, but they don't enforce them. They say, if you keep ignoring me, I'm done. But then when he ignores them again, they stay. They say, I need more effort, but when the effort never comes, they keep accepting the bare minimum. Boundaries without consequences are just empty words. And a man will only respect the limits you enforce. So, if he stops appreciating your kindness, pull it back. If he stops making time for you, stop making time for him. If he stops putting in effort, stop giving yours so freely. And most importantly, if he crosses a line, don't just tell him it's not okay, show him. That doesn't mean yelling, begging, or trying to force him to change. It means stepping back and allowing him to feel what life is like without your presence. A man values what he has to work for. He respects what he can lose. If he thinks you will always be there, no matter how he treats you, he has no reason to change. But the moment he realizes that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee, he will start to act differently. He will either rise to the occasion or reveal that he was never truly invested in the first place. Either way, you win because you are no longer allowing yourself to be taken for granted. And that is how you teach him the cost of losing you. A man will only value what he believes is rare, what he knows is not easily replaceable. And yet, so many women make the mistake of making themselves too available, too accessible, without requiring anything in return. They give their time, their energy, their love freely, believing that if they just give more, he will appreciate them more. But the truth is, when something is given too easily, it loses its worth. Think about it. When you work hard for something, when you put in effort, time, and dedication, you cherish it more. You don't take it for granted because you understand the value of what you had to earn. But when something is handed to you without effort, without struggle, it's easy to overlook it. That's human nature, and this is exactly why a man must feel like he has to work for your presence. If he believes you are always there, always available, regardless of how he treats you, he has no reason to step up. This doesn't mean playing games or pretending to be someone you're not. It means having standards. It means not overextending yourself for a man who is giving you the bare minimum. It means making sure that your time, your energy, and your love are reserved for someone who is showing up for you, not just when it's convenient for him, but because he genuinely values you. A man should feel that your presence is a reward, not a given. He should feel that your kindness, your love, your time, these are things he has to continuously earn, not because you're being difficult, but because you understand your worth. A woman who knows her value never chases, never begs, never over-explains. She simply exists in a way that makes a man realize, if I don't step up, I will lose her. And the beauty of this is that the right man will recognize it. The wrong one will complain, will call you difficult, will say you're asking for too much, but the right man, he will rise to the challenge. Because a man who truly wants you will always be willing to put in the effort. He won't need to be convinced to respect you, to appreciate you, to value you. He will simply do it. So never make the mistake of being too accessible to someone who has not earned the right to your presence. Because the moment he realizes that losing you is a real possibility, he will either step up or step aside. And either way, you win. When a man believes he can treat you any way he wants and still have access to your time, your energy, and your love, he will never change. He will never appreciate you because in his mind, there are no real consequences to his actions. He knows that no matter how much he neglects you, ignores your needs, or fails to prioritize you, you will still be there. And that is where many women make their biggest mistake. They tolerate behavior that should have never been accepted in the first place. You must understand something powerful. A man learns how to treat you based on what you allow. If you allow disrespect, he will continue to disrespect you. If you accept inconsistency, he will keep being inconsistent. If you excuse his lack of effort, he will never feel the need to change. Because why would he? He's still getting all the benefits of your presence without having to put in the work. A man must feel the weight of his actions. He must understand that if he mistreats you, there are real consequences. And those consequences don't come in the form of arguments, nagging, or trying to make him see your worth. No, the consequence is silence, distance, the removal of your presence. When you stop engaging, when you stop trying to convince him to act right, when you stop pouring energy into someone who refuses to reciprocate, that is when he will feel the loss. But let me be clear, this is not about manipulation. This is not about playing mind games or trying to make him chase you out of fear. This is about self-respect. This is about making it clear that you will not be in a situation where you are undervalued, that you are willing to walk away rather than settle for less than what you deserve. And here's what happens when a man realizes he can truly lose you. He either wakes up or he watches you walk away. A man who actually cares, who truly values you, will feel the shift. He will feel the difference between having you and losing you. And if he is serious about you, if he truly wants you in his life, he will take action. He will step up. He will correct his behavior. Not because you begged him to, but because he understands that you are not someone who will tolerate being taken for granted. But if he does nothing, if he lets you go without a fight, then that is all the clarity you need. That is your answer. And as painful as it may be, it is also a blessing. Because it frees you to make space for someone who actually sees your worth, who actually values what you bring to the table, and who will never need to be convinced to treat you right. So never be afraid to remove your presence. Never be afraid to create distance when someone is not valuing you, because the right man will rise to the occasion and the wrong one will simply fade away, and either way, you win. If a man never has to work for your presence, he will never appreciate it. If he knows that no matter what he does, you will always be there, always forgiving, always available, then he will take you for granted. Not because he's a bad person, but because that's human nature. We don't value what we don't have to work for, and that is why you must teach him, not through words, but through action, that your presence is a privilege, not a given. That your presence is a privilege, not a given. There is a powerful shift that happens when you stop making yourself so accessible, when you stop over-explaining yourself, when you stop chasing after clarity, after reassurance, after the love and effort that should be freely given. Because the truth is, a man knows when he's not showing up for you. He knows when he's being inconsistent, when he's neglecting your needs, when he's giving you the bare minimum. And as long as you accept it, he has no reason to change it. But the moment you shift, when you stop answering every text immediately, when you stop adjusting your schedule to fit his, when you stop being the one to always reach out first, he will notice. And more importantly, he will feel it. He will feel the absence of your energy, the absence of your availability. And that is when he has to make a decision. Will he step up or will he let you drift away? You see, a man only starts to value something when he realizes he could lose it. He only starts to appreciate your presence when he's faced with the reality of your absence. Because now he has to work for it. Now he has to show effort. Now he has to be intentional. And that is what separates a man who truly values you from one who simply enjoys the benefits of your presence without any real investment. So stop making it so easy for him. Stop giving your energy so freely to someone who hasn't earned it. Let him put in the effort. Let him show you through his actions, not his words, that he actually cares. Because if he truly values you, he will rise to the occasion. And if he doesn't, then you already have your answer. When a man assumes you'll always be there, he stops putting in the effort. He stops trying. He becomes comfortable, complacent. And why wouldn't he? If he keeps showing up no matter how little he gives, why would he feel the need to give more? That is why you must teach him through your actions that love is not a one-sided effort, that your presence in his life is not an entitlement, but a privilege that must be nurtured, respected, and reciprocated. You see, when you continue to tolerate inconsistency, when you keep making excuses for his lack of effort, when you stay even though your needs aren't being met, you send him a message, whether you realize it or not. You tell him that you don't require more, that you're willing to settle for less. And once a man believes that, he will never change. Because why would he? He already knows you'll stay. But the moment you shift, the moment you stop rewarding laziness with loyalty, everything changes. When he realizes you are no longer waiting by the phone for his half-hearted texts, when he sees that you are no longer bending over backward to make things work, when he understands that you will not beg for what should be freely given, he is forced to make a choice. Either he steps up or he steps out. And here's the thing, if he truly values you, he will step up. He will recognize what he stands to lose. He will make the effort, not because you begged, not because you complained, but because he understands that a woman of your worth does not wait around for a man to realize her value. But if he doesn't, if he lets you walk away without a fight, then he was never invested in the first place. And that is your answer. Silence is one of the most powerful tools you can use when a man takes you for granted. See, when you constantly explain yourself, when you argue, when you try to convince him to treat you better, you're giving him control. You're showing him that his actions, or lack of them, affect you deeply. And as long as he knows that, he knows he still has you. But when you go silent, when you pull back, that's when he starts to feel the shift. Because here's the truth. People don't appreciate what's always available. When you're constantly reaching out, constantly fixing things, constantly making excuses for him, he doesn't feel the weight of losing you. But the moment you step back, the moment you stop explaining, stop responding, stop trying, he feels it. He notices the absence. And in that absence, he starts to question himself. Did he go too far this time? Did he push you away for good? Is he losing you? And that uncertainty is what makes him realize your worth, because suddenly he can't predict your next move. Suddenly he doesn't have the comfort of knowing you'll always be there. And that's when he starts to value what he once took for granted. But the key is to stay firm. Don't break the silence just because he reaches out with a weak apology. Don't fall back into old patterns because he suddenly misses your presence. Make him earn his way back. Make him prove that he understands what he almost lost. If he truly cares, he will. And if he doesn't, then you just saved yourself from wasting any more time on someone who never deserved you in the first place. Silence is one of the most powerful tools you can use when a man takes you for granted. See, when you constantly explain yourself, when you argue, when you try to convince him to treat you better, you're giving him control. You're showing him that his actions, or lack of them, affect you deeply. And as long as he knows that, he knows he still has you. But when you go silent, when you pull back, that's when he starts to feel the shift. Because here's the truth. People don't appreciate what's always available. When you're constantly reaching out, constantly fixing things, constantly making excuses for him, he doesn't feel the weight of losing you. But the moment you step back, the moment you stop explaining, stop responding, stop trying, he feels it. He notices the absence. And in that absence, he starts to question himself. He starts to question himself. Did he go too far this time? Did he push you away for good? Is he losing you? And that uncertainty is what makes him realize your worth. Because suddenly, he can't predict your next move. Suddenly, he doesn't have the comfort of knowing you'll always be there. And that's when he starts to value what he once took for granted. But the key is to stay firm. Don't break the silence just because he reaches out with a weak apology. Don't fall back into old patterns because he suddenly misses your presence. Make him earn his way back. Make him prove that he understands what he almost lost. If he truly cares, he will. And if he doesn't, then you just saved yourself from wasting any more time on someone who never deserved you in the first place. Respect is not something you demand with words, it's something you command with your actions. When a man takes you for granted, it's often because he assumes you will tolerate disrespect. He assumes you will continue to give, to love, to forgive, no matter how little he contributes. But the moment you shift, the moment you show him that disrespect comes with consequences, everything changes. See, people only do what you allow. If you keep accepting broken promises, half-hearted efforts, and inconsistency, then that becomes the standard. That becomes what he thinks is enough for you. And the longer you accept it, the harder it becomes to break that cycle. But when you start enforcing boundaries, when you start showing that you refuse to be disrespected, he has two choices: step up or step out. This isn't about ultimatums or threats. It's about showing him through your actions that you are not a woman who tolerates half love. That if he chooses to treat you like an afterthought, you will remove yourself from his life. And that is a powerful lesson, because men don't change when you beg them to. They change when they realize they might lose you. Now here's the part most people struggle with. You have to be willing to walk away. You cannot set boundaries and then break them yourself. You cannot say you won't tolerate disrespect and then accept a weak apology without changed behavior. You cannot teach him your value if you keep proving to him that he can do the bare minimum and still have access to you. And trust me, when a man sees that you respect yourself enough to demand better, he will either rise to meet that standard or remove himself. And either way, you win. If he steps up, it means he's learned what it truly means to value you. If he walks away, it means he was never capable of loving you the way you deserve. And that realization is what sets you free. When a man takes you for granted, it's because he believes deep down that no matter what he does, you will always be there. He assumes that your love is unconditional in a way that allows him to put in minimal effort. And this belief doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from patterns, from habits, from a history of you being available even when he was inconsistent, of you forgiving even when he didn't truly change, of you choosing to stay even when you felt unseen. But here's the truth. People do not value what they don't have to work for. It's human nature. If something is given freely over and over again, without any expectation or requirement for effort, it loses its significance. And so, if a man believes that your presence in his life is guaranteed, He won't cherish it the way he should. He won't wake up every morning thinking, how can I make her happy today? Or how can I make her happy today? How can I make her happy today? He won't prioritize you the way you deserve, because in his mind, there's no risk of losing you. This is where the shift needs to happen, because the moment a man realizes that your love is not something he can take for granted, that's when his entire perspective changes. But that realization doesn't come from arguments, from begging, from constantly telling him how hurt you are. It comes from silence. It comes from distance. It comes from the sudden absence of what he once assumed would always be there. Imagine a world where the sun never sets. If there was no darkness, would we appreciate the light? If there was never a cold winter, would we cherish the warmth of summer? No. It's the contrast that makes something valuable. It's the absence that makes the presence meaningful. And that is exactly what happens when you pull away from a man who has been taking you for granted. At first, he may not even notice. He may assume that you're just in a mood, that you'll come back around like you always do. But then, slowly, reality starts to sink in. The good morning texts stop. The reassuring presence he was so used to disappears. The comfort of knowing you'd always answer his calls fades. He starts to feel something he hasn't felt in a long time: uncertainty. And uncertainty breeds appreciation. Suddenly, he's left alone with his own thoughts, forced to confront the reality of what life looks like without you. He may not have realized it before, but now, in your absence, he sees just how much you added to his life. The way you supported him, encouraged him, made his days brighter, gave him peace. And once he sees it, he has to make a choice. Either he steps up and fights for you, proving that he truly values you, or he lets you go, revealing that he never deserved you in the first place. And this is why walking away is so powerful. Not because it's a manipulation tactic, not because it's about playing games, but because it forces clarity. It forces truth. A man who truly cares will realize that losing you is a price he is not willing to pay. And a man who doesn't step up, that just proves he was never the right one for you to begin with. 4. But the key here is that you have to mean it. You cannot pull away just to get a reaction, just to test him. You have to genuinely be willing to remove yourself from a situation where you are not valued. Because the moment he senses that your distance is temporary, that you're just waiting for him to chase you so you can run back, he will not take it seriously. He will know that he still has control. And the cycle will repeat itself. That's why your strength comes from your willingness to choose yourself, to say, I will no longer give my energy to someone who doesn't appreciate it. And when you do that, when you truly walk away with no fear, no hesitation, that is when you will finally see who he really is. That is when you will know whether he was ever worthy of you in the first place. And that truth, that's the most powerful thing you can ever give yourself. If a man has taken you for granted for too long, then the most powerful lesson you can teach him is the reality of life without you. Because here's the truth: people only appreciate what they believe they could lose. If he has become too comfortable, if he has settled into the idea that you will always be there, no matter how little effort he puts in, then it's time for a shift. And that shift doesn't come from arguments, from explaining yourself over and over again, from trying to convince him of your worth. No, it comes from action. It comes from change. It comes from you deciding once and for all that you will no longer tolerate being undervalued. At first, when you start to distance yourself, he may not even notice. He may assume it's temporary, that you're just upset, that you'll come back around. But as the days go by, as he realizes that your energy is no longer being poured into him, something shifts. And this shift is crucial because it forces him to do something he has avoided for a long time: self-reflection. You see, when a man is used to your presence, he doesn't stop to question what he has. He assumes you're just there, like the air he breathes, like the ground beneath his feet. But when that presence is removed, when the certainty of you fades, that's when the questions begin. Why isn't she calling me? Why doesn't she seem bothered anymore? Is she moving on? And the deeper he falls into those questions, the more he begins to realize the truth. He had something valuable, and he didn't treat it the way he should have. Now, this is the moment of awakening for him. But here's where most women make a mistake. They give in too soon. The moment he shows a little remorse, a little bit of fear, they run back, eager to believe that he has truly changed. But real change is not instant. Real change is not just words, not just a sudden burst of affection. It's consistency. It's action over time. And if you don't allow enough space for him to fully process what losing you means, he will fall right back into his old habits the moment he feels secure again. This is why it's not enough to just walk away. You have to stay away until his actions prove that he has truly learned the lesson. And if he doesn't, if he lets you go without a fight, if he doesn't step up, if he chooses comfort over growth, then that tells you everything you need to know. That tells you that you were never the problem. That tells you that he was simply never ready to be the man you deserved. And that's the hardest truth to accept sometimes. Because deep down, you may want him to change. You may want him to wake up and realize what he's losing. But your value does not come from his realization. It comes from you knowing your worth, with or without his validation. The true power lies in knowing that you do not need to be with someone who has to lose you in order to appreciate you. Because the right man will never make you feel like an option in the first place. The right man will never take you for granted to the point where you have to teach him a lesson. He will cherish you, respect you, and love you without needing to be reminded of your worth. So, if you find yourself in a place where you are questioning whether someone truly values you, the answer is already clear. Because if you were valued, you wouldn't be asking that question at all. And once you understand that, once you truly believe it, you will never allow yourself to be taken for granted again. The choice is yours. Will you keep giving chances to someone who has proven they don't deserve them? Or will you choose yourself knowing that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee?